He kōna I purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
They say life is stranger than fiction.
But then we need a computer to do it, but we cannot actually, even with all the computing power of the Earth, have a computer powerful enough, unless maybe Santa has an entire planet somewhere that's just one giant computer.
But sometimes what we see in movies or read in books is so incredible that it obviously couldn't be possible. Or could it?
Light is both a wave and a particle. It turns out everything is both a wave and a particle, even electrons and protons in your body. So let's say we can put Santa into a quantum state.
Welcome to Sci Fi, Sci Fact. I'm Brian Crump, and this is a podcast where we take science fiction's strangest ideas, weirdest elements, most unfeasible plot drivers, and explore if they could actually happen in real life. Maybe they already have. And in every episode, we bring in a scientist from New Zealand's MacDiarmid Institute to explain the theories behind some of fiction's more fantastic flights of fancy, if any theory exists. Ho, ho, ho. In this Merry Christmas Eve special, Jan Aldridge, Associate Professor in Physics at the Faculty of Science in Auckland University, decks the halls of science to tell us how Santa might actually make all those annual deliveries on Christmas Eve down the chimneys in time.
I'm Santa Claus.
Right, and I'm the Tooth Fairy.
Well, I guess I'll just have to do it my way.
Holy cow! How'd you do that?
See, what did I tell you?
Come on, Santa Claus ain't real.
Want to go for a ride?
A ride? A ride on that? I've never even been in a plane.
Well, you'd better make up your mind. I'm pretty busy tonight.
Yeah, sure, if it's all right.
Do you know how to say yo?
Yo.
Let's kick off with an obvious question. Why is it that we never see Santa, we just see what Santa leaves behind?
Well, I mean, I had a hard think about this, and I had to think about there's a couple of things that if I was Santa, what I would do. One of them is there is now this, it's big business to try and have cloaking technology, something that you can wear or use to block out the fact that you're there. And there's actually a company I found out called Hyperstealth that basically have used some kind of lens. It's like a plastic see-through screen. And if you look it up, it just looks like a piece of glass. But if you stand behind it, nobody can see you. And they kind of see what's behind you because this piece of glass is designed in such a way that it diffracts and reflects the light, just like a normal lens does, but like in an extreme way. So that, you know, if you're standing close to it, it's hidden, but everything behind it is very far. So you can think that maybe Santa has his sleigh or himself fitted out from these shields. So suddenly if somebody sees him or he hears somebody moving around, he can bring up the shield and you can actually he can hide very effectively. You might think, there's a funny something over there, but you wouldn't be able to actually see that it was Santa Claus.
There's one problem, however, Jan, and that is a cloak that's actually a thing of like a pane of glass. That he's going to have to carry it with him, assuming it's a he, of course. It may not be.
Yeah.
Santa is going to have to carry this with him or her wherever he or she goes.
Yeah, that's true. That's why, I mean, there is another thing I've read recently is the same thing that we know that certain, I think, species of octopi can actually change their skin color. And so what I think a lot of people are trying to do now is try and mimic that with some sort of chemical reaction. So I know recently there's been a paper out where somebody has actually almost got like a sticky bit of skin or something that you can stick onto yourself. And it can make, if you adjust it right, it can be as if you're looking through your hand with some camera or something. I don't know if it would work with the human eye, but I mean, we've seen this before in one of the James Bond movies. I can't think which it is, where the car had screens on the outside. And you see this in a lot of science fiction shows where suddenly the plane disappears because it's basically got LED screens all over it. And you take a picture through the other side. And so you know what to look like. It knows what to look like on the other side as if you were looking through it. So if you actually wanted something like that, people are actually trying to develop that technology. It's not actual physically reasonable yet, but considering we can have flexible screens like on your phone, you know, if you have a suit made out of that rather than your very warm red material, then you would be able, I don't know how effective it would be, but certainly people again would have trouble seeing you if you were just looking like exactly like you should look like, if they could see right through you.
Could the suit that changes colour have a base colour, a default colour of red? Because that'd be handy to go with the myth, wouldn't it? Or the fact,
exactly.
Depending on your point of view.
Yeah, no, precisely. So you can make it look like, which is also another application. While we're all thinking about camouflage, can you imagine how great it would be if you could go out somewhere and your outfit clashes with somebody else and you suddenly want to change your colour? It'll be really useful.
Now, Jan, you're a physicist, and one of the biggest challenges, and even when I was a kid, I used to struggle with this one. How is it that Santa manages to go to so many places and seems to be just about everywhere at once? That seems to be really taking physics to the hilt, to the extreme, maybe beyond the extreme, beyond the event horizon.
Well, you really made me think when setting this one, and actually it also gives an answer possibly to why we never see Santa. So one of the most difficult things about physics is you have to kind of throw out everything you understand through your own eyes and ears about how the world works. Because when we go down to the very small level, the quantum mechanics level, things get a bit strange. And for people like us, when we're on this big normal scale of stuff, it's very difficult for us not to be anything other than like people, not be anywhere. But let's say we can put Santa into a quantum state. And so there's something like a small particle that's flying along can be many different places at once. And this goes back to the idea of Schrodinger's cat, where you have a cat in a box and there's like some quantum thing that can go off and maybe put the cat to sleep, or it doesn't do anything, so the cat stays awake. And so you don't know if the cat's in a box because of this quantum event, which is maybe a radioactive decay. You don't know if the cat's awake or asleep. So let's say we could put Santa into a similar quantum state by no one looking at him, right? Putting him in a box. And if you were to do this in such a way, maybe Santa can be everywhere in the world at once and then get everything done at the same time. So not only, I get onto why this means you can't see him and might not see him in a minute, but if you don't know where he is, he could be everywhere at once, because particles kind of seem to do this in certain situations. And it's only when you actually measure where they are, you don't know where they've been, but you know where they end up. Because that's the thing that, then Santa can go and visit all the places at once because no one's looking at him. Then maybe if someone was to possibly think they see him, he could actually then, rather than being where they think he is, he can collapse and suddenly be somewhere else.
But
because
I thought when you're observing, and if once something's observed, it's no longer either or. Once it's observed, it is either positive or negative. It is there.
Yeah.
So once he's seen, doesn't that quantum spell get broken?
But then what if you observe him that he's not there? And because he's got to be everywhere, it's a very low chance that he's somewhere. So,
but the other problem, Jan, is doesn't Santa have to be smaller than an atom for this to work? He has to be part of an atom. He has to be a quantum particle, doesn't he? And Santa looks like a fully fledged human, a rather large one even.
Yeah. No, this I'm not saying that's not a problem, but one of the things is when you look at the Schrodinger's cat experiment, there you've got something that is a big person, but you put them in a quantum state because you're reducing the measurement of whether they're awake or asleep down to a single quantum event, which is a single particle, a single atom decaying or not. And so if you can, I don't know how you do this. I'm just saying if we could somehow reduce Santa down so wherever he was dependent on one quantum event, possibly you could do this. I mean, but this is kind of the fun thing with physics, because you're completely correct. It works for particles, doesn't work for us. But then some of the fun stuff is when we try and make quantum work in the bigger and bigger world. And that I'm stretching to try and make an explanation, but that's the best thing I can come up with. So if we could try and do better quantum mechanics, better experimental quantum mechanics, maybe Santa has lots more knowledge than us because he's been around for a lot longer. So maybe he can work out how to do that.
Can I ask you a question, Jan? And this is a bit of an aside, but I find this stuff so fascinating because it is a bit of a mind mesh for me, mind blow. And that is quantum physics. was it a theory at first that some very clever people use, this either or, this superposition thing that you can have with quantum particles? It can be spinning one way or the other, and then it's only when it's observed that you actually get plus or minus, or however you want to describe it. Was that something that was first predicted and then observed? Because the prediction made the models of, and we were trying to explain things like, I guess, how electromagnetic radiation creates light and light waves and things like that. This explained it, and then did people observe it?
So the history is interesting because this subject is now over 100 years old, which is funny because we used to put it in the course that was called Modern Physics, but it's 100 years old. So we had to rename our course. But you're right with what you mentioned, is when we were trying to understand how something that's hot emits light, the only way we could explain that was by realizing that energy was quantized and that light comes in little packets called photons, which are little particles. And then what happened is, because we realized that light is both a wave and a particle, it turns out everything is both a wave and a particle, even electrons and protons in your body. So you're not made of real particles. Your particles are more like wavesicles, I suppose you can imagine, right?
We're made of nothing, aren't we? We're nothing.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, we're big wastes of space. But don't believe that. Just remember that your parents and Doctor Who think you're all special, so that's fine.
Yeah, and so is Santa. He's special too. Or they special, or she's special. Yeah. Now, how does Santa, however, even if he's a quantum particle, well, maybe that explains how Santa could get into a locked house. But if we go back to Santa as a human figure, a human-like thing with superpowers, Santa powers, how does Santa, A, squeeze down very narrow chimneys, B, get into houses and Christmas trees where there are no chimneys at all?
Yeah. So actually, I think you've just pointed it out yourself, because where you say that we're wasted space, what do I mean by that? Because most of the mass of what gives us our weight on the Earth is in the nucleus of our atoms, which are 10,000 times smaller, 100,000 times smaller than our atoms, which are already 10 billionths of a meter across. So these are really, really tiny things giving us our mass. Now, if I was Santa, I would try and modify physics in such a way that we would shrink down atoms smaller and smaller until they're, so like take away the gaps and space in our atom, because then we can become really, really tiny. And then you would be easily able to, you wouldn't even have to go down the chimney. You could climb through a crack in the wall. So, we've seen a similar thing in Ant-Man in the Marvel movies. So, it's this kind of thing that we've all got this space, let's take it out and shrink ourselves down. So that's how I would do it. Otherwise, you would have to go to some quantum mechanical thing and think about how you can change your size or your wavelength if you was going very, very fast or something, and tunnel quantum mechanically through a wall, which in theory you can do it, though it's very unlikely.
Are you saying we'd have to become like the material of a neutron star, say, which has got where the atoms have lost some of the components that an atom normally has under pressure, and so it becomes incredibly dense. But yet we'd be I mean, I don't know if you can answer this question, but say your typical, a neutron star, what a teaspoon of something weighs, there's this of material might weigh weighs the size of a small country or something like that. I don't know. Something mind-bogglingly massive, yet it's just a teaspoon in space. So say if your average human might be 70 kilograms, if it was compressed down to the same into the same density as a neutron star, how much space would we take up? Just a few atoms, normal atoms?
Probably about the size of a normal atom. You're right. Yeah.
My goodness.
I think that's right. I mean, and just thinking another way you can make your atoms smaller is one of the reasons they're so big. I'm hoping I'm getting this right, because otherwise all the physicists in the country will be saying, Jan, you're wrong. If we take all the electrons out of our atoms, we can replace them with a heavier type of an electron, which is called a muon. And so actually that would shrink all the atoms down to being smaller because they would have smaller orbits. So actually could do that, because again, we've got these copies of electrons like muons and taus, which are just heavier versions, but exactly the same particle. Although you wouldn't have very long because muons do decay.
And but also, again, Jan, if we were compressed down, and then we wouldn't. Could we even function as humans? We couldn't, could we?
Well, that's the thing. If you were to do it in some way to just made your atoms smaller, but the chemistry was still the same, then you'd be fine. But whether you'd experience faster or slower time, I don't know. But that would be the thing is, I mean, so going to a neutron star density, you're right, you would have trouble because you'd be neutrons and you'd be a very different kind of material. But if we were to do the other way of just making the atoms smaller, so the chemistry was the same, you could still live.
But you've got me onto something else now, Jan, and that is that if we are really dense, would we warp space-time, and would that allow us to, would time move more slowly for us or more quickly for us if we are trying to get around the world in one night to deliver a whole lot of presents? Do you see what I mean here?
Yeah.
When you're closer to a really big source of gravity, like say you're next to a massive, supermassive black hole, the closer you are, the faster time will move, won't it? So a minute for you might actually be. So it's going to be the opposite problem, isn't it? A minute for you would be about a year for somebody else, maybe, or something like that.
Yeah. A minute for somebody by the black hole is the person outside the black hole watching a person go to the black hole would have a year. The person at the black hole would only go towards a few minutes.
Okay, well, then that wouldn't help, would it? It's actually going to make it even harder to get around the planet in time.
Unless you were to put if you were to put a black hole at the center of the Earth, and then you could slow time down. Because, I mean, time does go slower on the Earth than it does in space.
Yes.
Because of the gravitational field. So if somehow you could locally increase the gravity of the Earth, then you could jump up and down. And if you could somehow have some fantastic special gravitational field, then you would be able to have the effect you're talking about, to give Santa the extra time.
If we don't have the ability to harness gravity in this way, and I don't even know if it's the laws of physics allow one to do this, how fast would Santa have to go, do you think, to get around to every home in the world? And we do have one thing here in Santa's favour, and that is that, of course, it's basically like 24 hours. Say if Santa's arriving between midnight and 1 a.m. on Christmas morning, around the world there are 24 midnight to 1 a.m.s in the international clock, aren't there? And so he's got a day to do this.
Yeah.
But could he? How fast would he have to go?
Well, yeah, very fast is the very thing. So I did check this. I went and did the calculations and found out what other people did or how people calculate it. So it turns out you'd have to travel something like 1 million meters a second, which is about 3,000 times faster than the speed of sound, which is a problem because you can't go that fast because you'd end up slamming into there. It's like if you're going into the air, basically it's like slamming into a brick wall because you're going so fast. Because I mean, the fastest thing we've ever had is like going, I think, is about Mach 7 or 8, so 7 or 8 times the speed of light sound. So basically, you can't do it, and that's because you've got something like however many million children you have in how many other homes, and the average distance between each home, and that's how you can work it out. And of course, I think Google do this every year because they always have their Santa tracker. But Santa doesn't appear to ever go that fast. But obviously, they've worked it out somehow. But yeah, it's. I mean, even to go around the Earth, you have to still go about 200 meters a second. But that's just going once round. It's not going to all the other different places. So yeah, I'm not sure how Santa gets that one. He must have something made of very strong material that can just cut through air like it's water.
And has to do it without creating a sonic boom. Because, you know, Santa plus the presents, the mass of the presents plus Santa plus the 8 reindeer. Is it 8? Or was it 12? I can't remember now off the top of my head. It's quite a few reindeer. It's going to create quite a loud sonic boom, isn't it?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And also, I mean, the other funny thing is, because if they're going that fast, I came up with another thing to actually estimate how fast Santa is going, which is where an explanation for Rudolph's nose, why it's glowing red. So if you were to see Rudolph coming towards you, and if they're going fast enough, you know, it's emitting radiation because we're hot, we're all emitting infrared radiation. Well, maybe I thought Rudolph is going so fast that the infrared radiation he's given off will be shifted into the red. The problem is, when you work out how fast that is, it's actually something like 99% speed of light. So it's even faster than what you'd have to go to get everywhere, which is good. But then again, you still would crash into the air and you get crushed just by trying to go so fast. So
I would have thought the friction in the air alone would make Rudolph's nose glow red, and all the other reindeer.
Yeah.
That could actually explain Santa's red suit. It's the friction, the air friction going so fast.
Yeah, and that would happen just right before he vaporizes. So that's probably not a good sign.
It seems to me like we're struggling with Santa. We're struggling. This is Occam's razor at its sharpest, wouldn't you say, Jan?
Yep. Well, yeah, but then I would say maybe there's not one Santa. Maybe if Santa had cloning technology, this is a better way. Maybe there's many versions of his same self. So if Santa was to actually have a biologist rather than a physicist, maybe they could then clone themselves, or even just have many siblings, and they all take a town away. So maybe it's not just one Santa. We have many different Santai that all go and try and get around everyone as quickly. And it's better to try and do things all at once in a parallel stream rather than just having one person doing everything.
Here's one last possibility, and that is that you are able to maybe control time, warp it, and maybe you've got what Star Trek has, which is the ability to energize, beam Santa down, and beam Santa down into the lounges and Christmas trees of everyone pretty much at the same time, because you're slowing time down where Santa is, and Santa's able to get everything done, and you're able to transfer matter from wherever Santa's based to the lounge of each person in 24 hours in the 24-hour period. We've got 12 midnight till 1 a.m., because I reckon that's the magic hour. That might work, wouldn't it, Jan? Definitely.
Yeah, but then it's the matter energy transporter that we've seen in Star Trek. We all have those. So in Star Trek, they have something wonderful called a Heisenberg compensator, which gets around this inherent uncertainty, which is easy to say but complex to understand, which is where you can't both know the position and how fast something is going very accurately. If you know one accurately, the other one's got to be more uncertain. So you can't actually take something apart at a subatomic level and put it back together. So that's one issue. But then even if you could do that, you've got to look at how many atoms there are. If you want to recreate something, you need to know exactly how many atoms there are and how many there are. And actually, if you look at that and how they're connections, the problem becomes quite simple, because there's not enough computer memory on the planet to actually store how something like a bike or a Santa or something else is put together. So there you're running against a problem of not that the physics doesn't work, which is one thing, but then we need a computer to do it, and we cannot actually, even with all the computing power on the Earth, have a computer powerful enough to transport something from one place to the other, unless maybe Santa has an entire planet somewhere that's just one giant computer.
But might we one day? What if we set up a giant supercomputer on the moon?
Yeah, maybe the moon is. I've heard many things in science fiction about what the moon is. It could be a giant egg. It's not. We know the interior. I haven't got a giant computer, but we would need to go to some new type of computational technology that we don't have. And we're really here stretching at things like quantum computing, which I don't really understand. I understand half of it. But with those sort of things, then maybe you could try and copy things and transport things. But it requires for that to work, a real shift in the way that we understand things. So it's tricky.
And at the end of all this, Jan, do you believe in Santa Claus?
I have to say yes, right? Because I've still got a small child. I mean, also one other thing I read is that we're all a little bit of Santa Claus, right? Because the best thing about Christmas is giving presents. So, maybe the reason or the way that Santa gets presents everywhere is because everyone loves giving. And so, spreading a little bit of kindness. And by doing that, that's one way that Santa gets around the world.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Sci Fi, Sci Fact, hosted by me, Brian Crump, produced by Andrew Robertson, and of course, made possible thanks to the incredible knowledge of those brilliant scientists at the MacDiarmid Institute. You can find more episodes of Sci Fi, Sci Fact on the RNZ podcast page. RNZ podcasts are also available on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or pretty much wherever you might find your podcasts. And make sure to follow us so you don't miss out on any new episodes.
You really are Santa Claus, ain't you?
Yes.